So it was a completely ordinary Tuesday in the Stone Age. Actually, nobody had invented Tuesdays yet, but if they had, this one would have been aggressively average. Grug was scratching his back against a tree. Pause ones. That was pretty much his whole morning routine. Scratch, yawn, stare at a cloud, scratch again. Then he saw it, half buried in the dirt, catching the sun just right. A rock. Not just any rock, a shiny rock. Grug's caveman brain, which usually operated on about 2 neurons rubbing together, suddenly lit up like a bonfire. Size. His eyes went wide. His mouth fell open. He dropped to his knees and dug it out like it was the last acorn before winter. He held it up to the sky. He turned it. He grunted. He grunted again, but with more drama this time. In Grug's mind, this wasn't a rock. This was the rock, the most important object in all of history. Pause ones. Why? Because it was shiny. That's it. That's the whole reason. He clutched it to his chest like a mother wolf carrying her cub. He paced around. He showed it to a bush. The bush didn't care. He grunted at it anyway. And then, trouble. A group of generic background cavemen wandered by. No names, no personalities, just a few silhouettes with sticks and bored expressions. One of them glanced at Grug, glanced at the rock, grunted with mild interest. That's all. A completely neutral grunt. Grug reacted like he'd been stabbed. He screeched. He hugged the rock so tight his arms turned white. He glared at the strangers with the fury of a man who had just been asked to share his last bite of mammoth jerky. Whispers. The cavemen shrugged. They started to walk away. But Grug didn't see that. Pause once. He saw a threat, a conspiracy, a nuclear escalation in his own head. He jumped onto a log, pointed at them, and yelled, "Ah, gee!" which loosely translated to, "This rock is mine, you dirt-sniffing trespassers." The cavemen stopped. One of them, confused, picked up a tiny pebble and tossed it in Grug's direction. It missed by about 10 feet. Size. To Grug, that was an act of war. He scrambled off the log, tripped over a root, face planted into the dirt, and still managed to scream dramatically while running back to his cave. The rock was safe. But the Stone Age would never be the same. Grug burst into his cave like a caveman who had just been personally challenged by the universe. He placed the shiny rock on a flat stone, stared at it, and nodded twice. It was official. This was now a military situation. He started building a fort. The plan was simple: tie a bunch of sticks together, drape some leaves over them, and create an impenetrable defense. Pause twos. The plan was also stupid. Within 30 seconds, the whole structure collapsed on top of him. Grug emerged with a stick sticking out of his hair and a leaf plastered across his face, and he looked genuinely proud. He grunted, patted the pile of sticks, and called it done. The narrator would like to point out that the fort would not stop a gentle breeze, let alone an angry caveman with a pebble. But Grug didn't know that. He struck a pose, grunted loudly, and declared the fort operational. Then he invented the flag. He grabbed a wilted fern, tied it to a bone with a piece of vine, and stuck it into the ground next to his fort. It drooped immediately. Grug saluted it. Pause ones. He had no idea what a flag was supposed to mean, but it felt important. He grunted at it, and the flag grunted back. Calm. It didn't, obviously. But Grug's imagination was running at full dumb speed. Next came the armor. Grug found a cracked clay pot, the kind you'd use to store berries if you weren't busy starting prehistoric wars. He put it on his head. It was too big. It sat crooked, covering one eye. He didn't care. He grabbed 2 animal bones, strapped them over his shoulders with more vine, and called it shoulder protection. Then he found a stick, sharpened the tip, and immediately wrapped the tip in moss because he didn't want to hurt anyone. Size, he called it a soft capture spear. He practiced battle poses in front of a puddle. He flexed. He growled. He slipped on a wet rock and fell into the puddle. He got up, dripping, and posed again. Perfect. The background cavemen, still standing around at the edge of the clearing, watched all of this with growing confusion. Then one of them, the one who had thrown the pebble, pointed at Grug's armor and grunted. Another one picked up a hollow log and shoved it over his head. Suddenly, the whole tribe was building their own ridiculous gear. One tied a rock to a stick and called it a superweapon. Another wrapped a dead fern around his waist and declared himself invisible. Twos. The Stone Age arms race had officially begun. Nobody knew what they were doing. Everyone looked completely ridiculous. Grug saw the enemy's preparations and grinned. Finally, a worthy opponent. He climbed onto a fallen tree, raised his soft capture spear, and gave a dramatic speech. It was mostly grunts, a few points at the sky, and one very aggressive finger jab toward the enemy camp. The other cavemen grunted back, stamped their feet, and threw a handful of mud in the air. Whispers. The mud landed on their own leader's head. He didn't notice. The first attack began. Both sides lined up. Grug shouted, "Ah, gee!" and everyone threw mud. It was spectacularly ineffective. Not a single mud ball hit its target. They all missed wildly. Then someone slipped, and someone else slipped on top of them, and within 10 seconds, both armies were a tangle of muddy cavemen lying on the ground, grunting in frustration. Grug tried to charge. He lifted his spear, took 3 running steps, and tripped over the moss tip. He face-planted. The shiny rock was still safe inside his cave. But the chaos was only beginning. And that's when the shiny rock decided it had seen enough drama for one Tuesday. Twos. It was sitting there, alone in Grug's cave, minding its own business. Then, a stray mud ball, thrown by someone who was aiming at literally nothing, bounced off a rock, ricocheted off a tree, and smacked straight into the cave wall, right next to the rock. Pause ones. The rock wobbled. Grug, still face down in the mud, heard a faint clink and lifted his head just in time to see his treasure roll out of the cave, pick up speed down the slope, and, plop, disappear into the river. Pause twos. Silence. Everyone stopped fighting. The mud-covered cavemen blinked at the empty cave entrance, then at Grug, then at the river, where the last ripples were fading. One background caveman grunted, another shrugged. They all looked at each other, then slowly wandered off, probably to find something more interesting, like a stick or a bug. Grug stood up. Mud dripped from his leaf helmet. His bone armor was crooked. His moss spear was bent in 3 places. And he smiled. "Ugh!" he declared, arms wide. He pointed at the river, then at himself, then back at the river. Pause ones. The narrator clears throat. What Grug meant to say was, "I win, because now nobody has the rock. That means I'm the only one who used one to have it, which is basically the same as still having it. So I'm the champion." Pause ones. He strutted back to his cave, convinced he'd invented warfare, won a war, and preserved his honor, all without actually fighting anyone or keeping the stupid rock. And that night, he slept like a baby. Pause twos. Because in Grug's world, losing the treasure was just another form of winning. And honestly, nobody was around to argue with him. Size. The first Stone Age war ended exactly how it started. Completely meaningless, completely ridiculous, and with Grug somehow convinced he was a genius. Softly, And somewhere downstream, a shiny rock sat at the bottom of a river, finally enjoying some peace and quiet.